My name is Jenny B. I am a motion graphic designer turned storyteller across all kinds of media like video games and film. And I have a few questions for you. Firstly, do you remember the first story you ever loved with another person? What was it? How old were you? Who did you love it with? And how did you love it? Did you make up games? Did you write stories featuring the characters? I don't really think it's something that you forget. Inspector Gadget was mine. And it was in kindergarten with someone who 22 years later remains one of my best friends. We would rehash episodes every day together during snack. Stories are often a means of escapism, but they can also be a beautiful source of connection and finding ties to other people here in the real world. There's something incredibly intimate about another person loving the same story as you. It's a bond that can transcend obstacles in personality and life circumstances, because at the end of the day, you're saying that you understand this crucial, intangible thing at the core of another person, and that person understands the same thing about you. Finding that connection isn't always easy. When it fails, you feel unseen and you feel unheard. But that spark and the special moments that it happens, that spark was the impetus and the point of my thesis film, Negative Space. Negative Space is a short mockumentary set in an art school, focusing on two constantly bickering students, Brenna and Reed. Brenna is an argumentative perfectionist who fails to enjoy most things because of her need to find flaws. Reed is a sensitive lover of media who prefers to deflect and avoids engaging in with difficult people. The two must overcome the gap in their personalities if they want to create a poster and not only pass their class, but manage to connect with other people as a whole. At the narrative start, neither party can truly see nor understand one another. Reed has his own narrative about Brenna pre-written, and Brenna engages but is half-hearted and hostile. What brings them together is a story they have in common, secret fable of the last neon star hero fighter in radical technicolor. Or rather, the values that it conjures and represents for the two of them. The loneliness of having working parents, having to make do in a poor income household, imagination play, and the sincere friendships that the film emphasizes, which are missing from both of their lives, creating a negative space. Only when Brenna and Reed realize that they are both earnest in their love of the film did they come to a full mutual understanding and find sincerity and friendship within one another. It was important to me to tell a story about connection via narrative because there's something simultaneously so lonely and intimate about being a person who loves story. As a person who makes stories, you're very hyper cut off from the world from around you as you build these new models of reality. They're crafted from a meticulous observation of the people and things around you. You know people and their behaviors, but in a specific scientific kind of way that becomes observational and removed to the point of being predictive. You think in terms of motivations and patterns and expectations, and you tend to isolate yourself. You find yourself living narratives because you think that they fit within a specific narrative model that you're supposed to be living in. For example, as a child, I thought you had to have real heroes, but all of my heroes were fictional, such as Sailor Moon, or Carrie from Castlevania, a game much hated by people, Castlevania 64. But I thought these were fake heroes. You needed real-world heroes, so I just told everybody that Olympic figure skater Tara Lipinski was my hero, and I couldn't tell you a thing about Tara Lipinski, even though I took ice skating lessons and was fairly hopeless at the sport. And I just thought that that was a thing that people needed to do, was have real heroes. Even a weird story kid like me had to have real world heroes. That's how the narratives always went. You don't often realize how trapped in these models and alone you feel until you're surrounded by people who are also living in their own story headspaces. You become exposed to new ideas from new people, new ways of thinking about stories. Slowly, we amend our little universes and add on things we've learned. Our lenses change and we evolve as storytellers. Coming to this program was an eye-opening experience for me in this way. I came to this program as a person who is very closed off to other kinds of narrative thinking, but working in close quarters with people who love story as much as I do, but in radically different ways, opened me up and made me feel less alone. Suddenly I had to work with and relax with people who deeply appreciated the kinds of things that I never would have given a second thought to otherwise. High art, robots, video game cutscenes, David Lynch, superheroes, Star Wars, non-linear plots, morally questionable photography, art movies, cheesy movies, so many things. More stories breed more understanding, breeds more stories, and so on and so forth. We were all connecting on different things, but at the core of it, we were connecting on story as a whole. And it was like Inspector Gadget all over again. Thank you. A mysterious stranger visits me in the middle of the night and pays me in marbles and ideas. And where do my ideas come from is the question. And I am going to paraphrase something Neil Gaiman said, which was, you have painful experiences and then you use that as compost and you grow art on painful experiences that you go through. And I think that sort of that's how where I get my ideas. You know, you live life and then you use that as inspiration in your work. Why did I choose to tell this in film? Well, I'm very much, I always like the narrative to inform the medium that I tell my stories in. And I wanted to reach as many people as possible. And for whatever reason, people are more open to live action film than other things. I don't think that's correct. Ultimately, I don't think that's a right way that people feel about things, but it is true. And I felt that I wanted to make something to make lonely people feel less alone, and I wanted to reach as many people as possible. So I felt film was the way to reach as many people as I possibly could. Also, there was something appealing about taking a medium like the mockumentary, which is inherently kind of biting and ironic, and make it sincere and, you know, kind of heart-driven. My favorite movie from the 80s and 90s.
Preferably like a cartoon. Like what was the inspiration for Last Neon Star?
Oh yeah, so the inspiration, animated movie inspiration for Secret Fable of the Last Neon Star, Hero Fighter, and Radical Technicolor. I don't blame you for not remembering. Use the acronym SIFLNSHIP, guys. It's the Last Unicorn, which is also my favorite book. It's probably my favorite animated film, and as a child I would obsessively rent and re-rent the VHS tape, probably put a lot of damage on the library's VHS copy, and I probably would have stolen it like Reed did. But yeah. Sure. So the story changed a lot from the summer. It was a very different piece then. It was about collaboration and it was still about collaboration, but it was more about critique and how we can be critique bullies. It was a very different piece. After the summer, I realized I had to change the tone a lot if I wanted to live with it for like a bunch more months. And I, at the time, was feeling I was going through some stuff, and I was really dwelling a lot on the idea of liking things and how liking things is such a vulnerable act. And when you show someone something, that's such an expression of vulnerability. And for that person you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable position, and for that person to smack you down and be like, yeah, whatever, it like sucks or something, I was going through, I was really thinking about how I was sort of doing that to people and a lot, and I was sort of like facing a bit of an existential crisis about hating on things as a way of critiquing things. And I wanted to kind of explore this idea of liking things and the vulnerability of liking things. And originally Brenna was the main character, but as I wrote this, Reed became as much a protagonist as Brenna, even though I previously would never have set out to make a dual protagonist story. It's just not something, again, because I was very narrow in my definitions of narrative and what I felt were strong narratives. But I knew that Reed had ended up a protagonist by the end of it, because it had to be such a piece about being vulnerable and vulnerability. I'm losing a little bit of the thread, but yeah, so it became an exploration of vulnerability and liking things, and more of a dual protagonist story. The characters evolved both as protagonists through the exploration of this theme. Some challenges I ran into, well, making a film, everything's gonna go wrong. It's just, they say that, but you should really just assume that. Like, you should plan for the thing to go wrong from the outset. And I learned that pretty quickly. Also, working with people, I think I learned ultimately from the whole process how to accept that people are very different. People are wired differently, and you can set standards for yourself, and those standards can be very unrealistic. And then to expect similar standards from other people is even more unrealistic. And you just kind of have to live with the fact that people are different, and that's okay. So coping with that and confronting that aspect of myself was very difficult. Yeah, and also time. Time is never on one side. And yeah, I'd say all those things were pretty difficult. Yeah. Thank you.